Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. Shady boss lied about my position to keep me from policy allowed benefit for years. I found out and it changed everything. A few years ago, I worked at a big retail company and had for many years. Eventually I went through enough grad school education to get my license to work at a higher level. Much more pay, more job satisfaction, more responsibilities, fancy title, but the job market was rough. I stayed on with my company to work in a floater position, where I would cover a large area and work at all the stores within that area on a rotating but irregular basis. Eventually, I wanted to get a staff position, where I have a single store assigned. The area was huge, the furthest store being over 100 miles from my home, and that is exactly where I was assigned to train for the new role. It was a rough store, folks in my position were robbed and assaulted at gunpoint, neighborhood was very unfriendly, volume at the store was among the highest in the state. Staff turnover was, as you might expect, extreme. Well, after training I wasn't really being scheduled to float to other stores. Once a month, at most. I asked to be scheduled a little more diversely, since most of the stores in my area were much closer to my home and didn't require 4 hours of driving a day. Bossman told me that I was the only floater experienced enough to handle that store. I didn't buy it, but what can you do, right? Well, a colleague told me about the mileage reimbursement policy. Floaters working at a store more than 50 miles from home can file for reimbursement of mileage over that 50 miles each way, can even include meals. So I filled a few of these out and sent them to my boss to sign. He didn't quite refuse, but he never actually signed and filed them. I suspect as soon as I left his office at our district center he tossed them out. Bossman tells me later that they must be lost in the system. Eventually, the same colleague showed me how to fax those same forms to accounts payable, bypassing the district bossman. So I started doing just that. One day Bossman calls me in a panic. He wants to stop my filing the forms. I asked to be floated closer to home, but he won't budge. He needs me at that miserable store. He promises me he'll make me a staff role at that store if I promise to stop faxing those forms. Staff roles are a promotion and usually come with better pay and a few other little conveniences, so I agree. Bossman says there won't be a pay bump right away, but that it'll come down the road. That never happened. 2 years later the situation at the store has become too toxic for even me. I asked to step down from the staff position to be a floater again and be allowed to float to other stores. Bossman says that I am already a floater, never was in a staff position, but that he can't let me work at other stores because it's better for me and the customers if I stay there for familiarity. Floaters do not get scheduled to stores exclusively, so I am being singled out because they are still desperate to cover that dump of a store. I'm livid, so I start looking. It took me months, but eventually I found an opportunity to make my dream career transition. I put in my formal notice and that's when the fun started. Remember that whole mileage reimbursement policy? Well, I kept meticulous track of all my shifts, and there is no statute of limitations baked into the policy, so I started filling out those reimbursement forms to retroactively cover every single shift from the past 2 odd years. I skipped the meal part since I didn't want to go through all that effort of finding receipts. I had a friendly store manager sign off on them, and I started sending them to accounts payable directly again. I didn't fax them all in at once, but for each shift in my final 2 weeks I faxed a few dozen in. We still have fax machines in that line of work, believe it or not, I figured, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, accounts payable declines the forms. On my last few shifts I started getting the checks from accounts payable. Not added to my paycheck but sent to me directly. Mileage reimbursements are non-taxable income, so this was all tax-free money coming to me. It must have taken a while for the charges to show up on a balance sheet, because a few weeks after my final paycheck I got a call from my now former bossman. He wasn't happy. He got some big loss prevention manager involved and together they started saying I was breaking some rule by requesting the payments. They specifically claimed I was ineligible because I agreed I wouldn't be eligible in a staff position. They then threatened legal action against me if I didn't remit the full amounts back that same week. But I had the email chain from when Bossman said I was never staff and always a floater. I politely referenced that email chain before letting them know firmly that because I was lied to, our prior agreement didn't apply and I was fully eligible all along. Corporate policy, as confirmed by HR, agreed with me, so I let them know I wasn't returning a single penny. In the end, the reimbursements amounted to well over $21,000, and I transitioned into my dream job. I could say that I would trade that money back for the time I lost commuting to that miserable store, 4 hours every shift, but all that pressure motivated me to making the best career move of my life. The great satisfaction of not only professionally surpassing my old boss, but getting to tell him that his lies cost him way more on the way out is almost priceless. I also shared my story and method with many colleagues who were being told wrongly by the bossman that they didn't qualify for this policy. Next story. You'll honor the price. I have about 20 can lights in my house, they were all incandescent. About 5 years ago, Home Depot had a sale on Cree LED bulbs. Dumb luck, I was on their website at work and saw the deal. I figured it was time to get into the modern day and save some money on my electric bill. Okay, I'll swing by on my way home. I did not order them online, but the website said the store had them in stock. I printed out the sale price and SKU from the web. Went to the store and loaded up my cart. Went to check out. Rung up at the wrong price. I showed them the online advert. They said no dice. I said, but you match prices. This is a Home Depot store, this is from a Home Depot website. Manager said sorry, but the online store is different from the brick and mortar store, we don't match online prices. Okay, fine. So I put the light bulbs back on the shelf. Go to the contractor desk and hop on their computer. Go to the website, make an online purchase. Have the pro desk print out my receipt. I head out the car, hang out for about 30 minutes. Come back in to pick up my light bulbs. Manager comes over and I show them the receipt for the pickup of the bulbs. Manager, where's is the cart that you had them in? Me, I put them back on the shelf since you weren't going to sell them to me. So he gets someone to go get the bulbs off the shelf for me. Manager says, you know you could have just left them in the cart. I say, and you could have honored the price when I first got here. It's not much, but it made me happy. Next story. A customer was upset I didn't give her the right amount of fish, she was right. I used to work at a mom and pop store that sold clothes, farm supplies, animals and sporting goods. Anyway, since we sold sporting goods we also sold bait fish. Fishermen would frequently stop by our store to buy them to fish with and they were sold by the dozen. Usually, when I scooped bait, I would give a few extra fish to my customers. I had one Russian lady come in to purchase bait fish, so just as I normally did, I scooped a net full of fish and started dumping them in the bag, counting them individually, and added a few extra to the bag. The lady watched me do this but insisted that I did not give her the correct amount. I assured her that I not only gave her the dozen she paid for but I gave her a few extra. I literally just counted and have done this long enough that I was really good at eyeing when it was over a dozen. This lady just kept insisting that I didn't give her enough, so I said, okay, let's count together just to be sure. So I dump all the fish from the bag back into the net and we started counting together very slowly 1, 2, 3, for ECT. We get to 12 and it's very clear there are several extra fish still in the net. I look up at her and I was like, oh, you were right, I didn't give you the right amount. I then proceeded to dump the remaining fish back into the tank right in front of her and gave her exactly the amount she paid for. Next story. I should quit my primary job? Yeah, okay. About 16 years ago, I was working as a greeter at Olive Garden as a second job just to make ends meet. The day before Mother's Day, I was about 10 minutes late punching in to work. I was coming from my primary job, changed clothes when I got there and punched in. The manager immediately pulled me aside and said that I needed to be more courteous to my coworkers and show up on time as my being late affects other people. I responded that I was aware and I did call in to let them know I would be late and that the person who answered was the person I was taking over for and that she said to take my time because she was just going home and spending the night in alone, no big deal. The manager laid into me. She told me that I'm not the type of person that can hack having 2 jobs, that I was too inconsiderate to work 2 jobs, and that maybe I should choose which job I value more and quit the other one, and that if I quit the Olive Garden that I would not be welcomed back. Initially, I thought, well, I'm not going to let you chase me away. But then I realized, this is a second job. I don't have to be here. I don't have to let her talk to me that way. I went home and told my S/O, who also worked there as a second job, what was said. We mutually decided that I should quit the Olive Garden. So I went in for my morning Mother's Day shift wearing my street clothes, went to the back office to find the manager, and said so. I put a lot of thought into what you said and have decided that you were right, and working here, for you, is not for me anymore. She looked stunned and said, well, you're going to work today, right? You know Mother's Day is our busiest day of the year, you can't just up and quit, today of all days. I said, well, maybe this will be a lesson for you on how to speak to your employees and how to be a decent human being. Besides, you said yourself I'm too inconsiderate to work here. And I walked out. Have not set foot in another Olive Garden since. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.